today, in a stunning news, Jay Monahan releases a memo to the PGA Tour members announcing that the PGA Tour has merged with the LIV Tour. The same Jay Monahan who admonished players a year ago, last June, for taking the bag, taking the money, and lacking loyalty, trusting in the American Tour, the PGA Tour. A year later, to the month, the PGA Tour has merged with the Saudi-backed public investment firm, which is LIV. Craziness.
That dirty blood money from Saudi Arabia must have suddenly been cleaned over the past year, because now it's perfectly acceptable for the PGA Tour to accept that money, where a year ago it wasn't acceptable for guys like Phil Mickelson and Brooks Koepka and Dustin Johnson and Bryson DeChambeau to leave and take that money from the Saudi wealth fund. A lot of thoughts, and we're going to get into all of them, and there's a lot of angles to unpack from this story, but I do want to start with this. 1 year ago to the day, in Canada at the Canadian Open, which is going on this week now, Jay Monahan, in a room full of PGA Tour players, asked the question, have you ever had to apologize for being a member of the PGA Tour in regards to the LIV Tour? And here we are a year later, and this is a merger between these tours, Hutton. This is an amazing day for the golf fan across the world, in America, everywhere, because you don't have to worry about a competing brand taking away the players you want to watch on the tour you watch most often. And make no mistake about it, people are watching the PGA Tour. They're not watching LIV Tour on television. But what the LIV Tour was able to accomplish was pushing away from the narrative that it was PGA Tour rules and nothing else mattered, and they set the standard and the barrier for everyone else, and if you couldn't get in, it didn't matter because they had the rule book. They wrote it, they controlled it. Well, now there's a shared experience with that rule book, and LIV Tour helps write it as well.
Last June, LIV, they teed off with their first event at Centurion Club in London, and when within minutes of teeing off, Commissioner Jay Monahan issued a memo, just like he did this morning, a year ago to the month, and he suspended the 17 players that joined LIV Tour. And in the memo, the quote was, for turning their backs on the PGA Tour by willfully violating a regulation. They then preached morality. You see this all over the place. They preach morality and loyalty, when in regards to why he was saying all that, it's just to keep the PGA Tour as we knew it then. It wasn't about morality. It was about surviving. And in order to survive, this morning, the memo was released to the PGA players, which, by the way, speaking to a couple of them, I was on speakerphone during a practice round at the Canadian Open this morning. They found out at 9:55, either through social media or through the memo that Monahan pushed out. Apparently, no one saw this coming from the PGA end of it. And from the LIV Tour end of it, the top players are saying, or at least acknowledging, they weren't expecting it either. But what this comes down to is LIV taking over. And honestly, they took over last August based on a court ruling and a concurring opinion following the ruling where the judge actually sided with the PGA Tour. But Chad, they then appealed, and the Saudis, with their $750 billion, jumped on board with the antitrust lawsuit that Phil Mickelson and others were a part of. And what that led to was, in the appeal, more time to kick the can down the road with their billions upon billions of dollars through the legal system. And we were going to see discovery on both sides. And the PGA Tour didn't want discovery to happen. And they blinked. I don't know how much you look at it based on the merger that took place today, where Judge Freeman, it was Judge Beth Lapson Freeman in the U.S. Northern District of California. She found originally that the Saudi-backed LIV Tour, the players that were kept out of the FedEx Cup down in Memphis, they didn't have any leg to stand on in terms of them not being allowed to play. But then came an appeal. And Chad, the quote of memories fade and documents may disappear over time Thus, a full halt of discovery would harm the litigation process. And then she pointed to the tour's gamesmanship claim, saying they have so much money, they just want to keep it in the courts, as unconvincing. This happened last month. And you look at the wealth fund and everything involved, and the blood money that apparently Phil Mickelson fell on the sword for ends up backing the pockets of the PGA Tour today.
Amazing day for Phil Mickelson.
Yeah.
Amazing day for Brooks Koepka. Everyone else who kept receipts, Koepka clearly did, calling out Brandel Chambly, saying a wellness check on Chambly today.
Guess who has to cover the tour now?
And guess who may end up resigning, honestly. I mean, I don't know how you come back from that. If you're him with everything, I mean, he has been the most outspoken critic of Saudi Arabia and the LIV Tour throughout. I don't know how you go out there and try to put on a brave face and act like now this is all okay. And keep in mind, all this talk from Monahan and a lot of people about LIV and about the morality of it and everything else. And Hutton, I think you've done a good job illustrating the hypocrisy from a lot of different levels of business.
It's clicks and headlines
different
and BS.
Sports leagues and everyone else that take that money on a routine basis, and then
they don't care.
Want to speak out when other people take
the money from the advertisers who are also Saudi backed.
Well, this is
the PGA Tour.
Maybe the big takeaway for me in all of this. All that criticism about Saudi Arabia, all that criticism about where the money's going, all the criticism about human rights violations, everything else. Yasir Al-Rumayyan, who is the governor of Saudi Arabia's sovereign wealth fund, is now the chairman of the board of directors of the PGA Tour. Let that sink in for a second. The guy with the key to the vault of all of the money of the sovereign government of Saudi Arabia is the chairman of the board of directors of the PGA Tour. After all of that talk from Jay Monahan, this is now the situation that we find ourselves in today. This is a groundbreaking golf story. I would argue it's a groundbreaking sports story, not just for America, but for the world. Certainly a historic day in the United States and Saudi Arabia. This is not the end of it. This is the beginning, and I think it's just an incredible story all around. We're going to get into a lot of it, and Hutton, Jay Monahan did not duck the fact that he's going to get crushed over this. In a quote, he said, "In the short term, I expect a lot of questions and criticism, but in the long run, players who stayed with the PGA Tour will see they benefited in many ways." I would ask this question, Jay Monahan, on that last part. How?
Yeah.
How did the guys who turned down hundreds of millions of dollars to only a year later see that they're going to take that money and have a chance to play in all the tournaments they want to on PGA Tour? How are you going to argue to those players who stood behind you and argued every single talking point you threw out there? Tell me how they're going to benefit in the long run when they turned away that money, and now they're right back in the same spot that Bryson DeChambeau, Brooks Koepka, Phil Mickelson, all of these guys who were the enemies of the state being the PGA Tour, they're now welcome back with open arms.
Yep.
Explain to me how those that stayed with the PGA Tour, repeated your talking points you wanted them to, defended you at all costs. How are they really going to be okay in the long run? They're going to be okay, but they're not the winners in this. It's pretty clear to me LIV Tour wins. And the guys who took the bag and left and are now welcomed back in with this merger, they're the winners in this story.
Well, Jay Monahan remains in power from the PGA Tour perspective. But you're right. PGA Tour is now bought and has sold itself to the Saudis. Here's what the Tour merger comes down to through the memo, where Monahan sent out a memo to the PGA Tour members this morning. Many of them, the players that Chad just described, found out on social media firsthand, not through the memo, while they were at the golf course. The PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the Public Investment Fund, which is LIV Golf, they're going to combine commercial operations. The mission, tell me if you've heard this before. It's no longer to grow the game of golf, which is the BS that Mickelson and others were pumping last year. Now it's to unify the game of golf on a global basis. The new collectively owned for-profit entity is nameless, but it's to be determined on the name of the new tour. The LIV Tour will make they will make a massive capital investment to the new entity, name to be determined, and facilitate the growth of the new tour. The PGA Tour will remain as a 501c6 tax-exempt organization, which is also ludicrous. PGA Tour retains administrative oversight of the PGA Tour, including sanctioning of events, but now LIV Tour is going to be sanctioned in order to participate and vice versa. They've also mutually agreed to end all pending litigation. This is really what it comes down to. They've agreed to end all pending litigation between the participating parties, and the process to be established for players to reapply for the PGA Tour or the DP World Tour membership after the 2023 season will be determined, which says nothing. There's a huge open-ended area there that must be described. But as far as who's running things, it's the same group that Mickelson and others joined up with last year and took the money. And specifically, the man in charge was sitting right next to Jay Monahan this morning, Yasir Al-Rumayyan. Listen to him.
We are investing in the game that everybody loves. The control is not there. It's the governance that we would like to have. It's going to be, a vote system in a board, and the majority in the board will be with the PGA. It's not going to be with us.
He did not respond.
Yeah, and he's now running the PGA Tour. Meanwhile, Chad, you can go down and listen to Jay Monahan, who is he was asked what the expectations are for fans and the fan response to today's news.
A lot of people have been reading about the tension. And I said previously that we were going down our path, they were going down theirs. And today, that tension goes away. The litigation is dropped. We're announcing to the world that on behalf of this game, we're coming together. It's less about how people respond today, and it's all about how people respond in 10 years.
Let's do this. My man is
See, here's what happened, Chad. The PGA Tour bluffed last year. They didn't have any real balls with this. They bluffed. And LIV Tour has the bank accounts and the bankroll and the backing of the Saudis to end up where we're not 5 years down the road, right? We were doing hypothetical topics last summer. Where are we 10 years from now? What's going to happen to the PGA Tour 5 years from now? Is LIV going to sustain who they are and this tour being on, a television network that we're not watching? No one's watching it. The answer is not only are they going to do that, the PGA Tour will bow to them within 12 months. That's shocking. And the same dude that was preaching all this dissension is now handshake and hugs and glorifying the merger based on the fact there's no more dissension.
Yeah, and I picked apart one part from that quote we just heard, the audio we heard from Al-Rumayyan, who said from the very beginning the whole initiative was how to grow the game of golf. And I think that was achieved today, was exactly that. And that's what Phil Mickelson was arguing, and that's what he's saying. And it's hard to argue with them right now on that. I do think the game of golf has grown because of all this. Now, Jay Monahan coming out and saying, that's not about how fans react or people react today. It's about 10 years from now. That is a convenient statement from someone who is rightfully going to get crushed today.
But also,
because
Chad,
he's a big loser in this,
and
he can't acknowledge it, but that's the case.
But they're
also going to stand to benefit financially.
I can't stand hypocrites.
Yep.
Someone who will look someone in the eye and lie to their face. And that's exactly what the PGA Tour did to its own membership. And Monahan is saying, it's not about today, it's about 10 years from now. Don't react. It's not about today's reaction. He's the same dude who reacted the minute they teed off in London last year. Within minutes. Look in the mirror. And the fact that, the mergers, PGA Tour players, they're pissed. How could you not be? Coming up in 45 minutes, they have a players' meeting at the Canadian Open with Monahan. And my guess is he needs to bring the hard hat in there because they didn't know about this until everyone else found out and did a double take to see if CNBC's report was accurate and true because it looked like something on April Fool's Day.
Well, a little preview of that meeting that's coming up. There's going to be a lot of questions from the players that are there. He's going to get a pass because a lot of the top name players that would have been offered a lot from LIV aren't going to be at this meeting because they're not playing in this tournament. But he's still going to get some tough questions to these players. And Hutton, his defense is going to be, you all stand to gain big time financially from this deal. Trust us on that. This is going to be beneficial for you. Now, the retort that I would have if I'm one of the players was, you told us not to take the money a year ago because of the morality of it and for loyalty purposes to the PGA Tour. And now your defense of this merger and this deal is you stand to gain a lot of money. We all do from this. That is hypocrisy. And that is what was at the root of all of this for Monahan. And it showed its face today with this merger and represents a positive development in bringing harmony to men's professional golf. That's what Augusta National said about this. So I'm trying to look at this from all angles. And when you look at it from the fans' perspective, that's the point I want to get across is I do think overall this is a good thing for the golf fan now moving forward. And you've got the Royal and Ancient Golf Club acknowledging that runs the Open Championship, the British Open. And you've got Augusta National acknowledging that this now brings harmony to professional golf. Ultimately, I think that's the good part for the fans.
Yeah, but the major tournaments, the championships, they were kind of the middleman in this. They facilitated the LIV Tour players interacting and winning championships, major championships, in front of the PGA Tour professionals, right? They were kind of the middleman in all of the – there wasn't a ton of LIV Tour talk with everyone we've interacted with. And then, you know, the court rulings and everything else play a huge factor. And by the way, the PGA Tour, they're not the first. They won't be the last to take Saudi money. But the way that it was handled a year ago from the public image of the PGA Tour, you know, let's wave the flag. Stand and salute the PGA. Thank you, Rory. We love you. You're now the voice and the face of golf. Screw Phil Mickelson. Brooks Koepka can go, you know, sit on and spin. And meanwhile, the truth is they were scared. And they knew that they were going to lose in court. And ultimately, they didn't have the financial backing to go toe-to-toe with the Saudi-backed league that has $700 billion in this wealth fund, which is just nuts. But UFC, WWE, and many of your favorite artists that you listen to on the radio or through, you know, streaming, they're all doing special shows over in Saudi. And the PGA Tour's teaming up because nowadays that's how you stay afloat. You sell yourself. You whore yourself out. And the PGA Tour has done that a year after they claimed that they're current players and champions and people that they pointed to as the stars on tour did the same thing. And Mickelson is, I haven't seen where he said anything yet, but considering the way that the public reaction was to him, he wouldn't show up to certain tournaments. Ridiculous.
Well,
they wouldn't follow him on CBS's coverage or ESPN's coverage on Thursday and Friday at the Masters, but all of a sudden they had to because he's at the top of the leaderboard fighting for a championship.
Cue up the gif of Vince McMahon, you know, coming out of the being announced.
Yeah.
Next time Phil Mickelson goes up to a podium anywhere for a press conference, that's going to be his swagger coming into this. I want to close this segment with this right here because this is where it all comes down to. And Allie in our YouTube chat, by the way, watch us on YouTube. I'll interact with you there as well. Is making some great points about the almighty dollar. And this is the hypocrisy of all of Jay Monahan. And this is the best way I can sum it up quickly. People only preach about loyalty and integrity and morality when they're getting outbid. And that is all Jay Monahan had to fall on, was these people are evil, they're dirty, their money is bloody, and the PGA Tour stands for what is all holy and righteous in the world of golf. And if you care at all about your legacy and your integrity, then you stay with us and make maybe less money, but your legacy will be intact. And they had to rely on that because they could not outspend the sovereign Saudi government. And a year later, when it benefited them financially, to end this lawsuit and to take their money in advertising dollars,
yes,
which is a part of this deal, the PGA and Jay Monahan, they're going to step in front of a microphone and tell you, I know you're going to react negatively to this now, but we did what's right for the game of golf. Give me a break. This is all about money. It's always been about money. Do not preach integrity, morality, anything else. It's about this right here, the almighty dollar. And guess what won today? The almighty dollar. But I will argue also the winners today, golf fans.
Sure.
Because I think a united golf professional world is good for the sport.
I just hate people that hide behind certain things. And that's what Phil Mickelson was pointing out. He didn't disagree with the fact that he took the money. But he said, I'm going to change the way this tour is governed. And he has. Because he was saying, while they were preaching loyalty and respect and morality and, hey, keep the tour together, don't let the Saudis take over, Mickelson was saying, you're fake, you're greedy, you're lying, and you're bluffing. And I point this out because he said it in one of the initial comments. They tried to charge him like $1 million for the rights to his own highlights for the match on TNT, the PGA Tour.
That was the last straw for him.
Well, think about that, though.
Yeah.
And the simple fact that here we are, 12 months later, is ridiculous, considering all of the crap that they fed their own players who found out the same way we did.